There's a story I heard recently about a man from the west side of Columbus, and it's profoundly real and analogous. This man had an experience meeting God in California, kind of among those red oaks that people travel from all over the world to see. Then later he had a church experience where he met Christ and was baptized. He then started praying for people on the west side, and as he was praying for people on the west side, he kind of noticed some of their travel patterns, and he started to make this thing that would happen every week where he'd bring people in on kind of their journey to oftentimes go get drugs, to come in and have a piece of pizza, and he'd pray for them, and he called it prayer and pizza, which is a clever name. Before all this man named Scott was a multimillionaire. He was an owner of a successful business in the Upper West Side of Manhattan, and he had sold his company but stayed in the C-suite and was just kind of living that big time, super wealthy, rich life. But if you went into his office on any given Wednesday afternoon, you might find him snorting cocaine. And that got the best of him. Eventually, he lost everything and spent all of his money on drugs. He ended up in rehab and then is in AA. And now, after all of that, he runs Prayer and Pizza because of God's grace. Scott has some kids and Scott has a dog. And one night, his dog sniffed out 3 articles of clothing that he had stashed away. These were items from his past, from the life that he lived when he was in Manhattan and in a high rise, living that life. And these were expensive items. Some of you may have some of these items. Most of us probably don't. But one was a Burberry belt, a Prada tie, and then a silver money clip from Tiffany's. And the dog happened to sniff these out. They were hidden away. And his older daughter kind of said, "This is part of you that I've never seen. It's hard to imagine you living that old life," she said to him. "It's hard to imagine you wearing those things and doing that." She didn't even know that he had those things until the dog found them and made them into his toys. We often, I think, have parts of our lives that are similar to this, that we hide away. Right? Things about us in our past that we really don't want people to know about, or even things about our present reality that we don't want people to find. We don't want people to see them. And we feel that if people really knew some of the things from our past, that those people might separate themselves from us. There's a very real experience that happens when someone sees a part of your past that you're not necessarily proud of, or something that you know was wrong, and then someone finds out, and you feel that kind of emotional disconnection. Or you feel such great success in your current relationships that you would never want to compromise the experience that you're having, say, with maybe a new romantic lover that you found that you're thinking about marrying, and then there's this part of your past that they can't find that out because I could never risk losing this. And this is something that I think we all go through and are going through. This is a story that I believe is remarkable, and it's a story that's like so many other stories, yours and mine, and it's wonderful in the sense that there's newness, but it's also mysterious in how there seems to be sometimes a continual manifestation of what was then in the now. It's a great challenge to think through these types of things, but it also can be confusing. Many of us feel that our past is still with us, and we hope no one ever knows it, or that our present attitude or our actions might kind of deem us unacceptable, that we're not okay. My past makes me not okay, or my present makes me not okay. If they knew what happened then, I'd lose connection now. If they knew what's going on now, I'd lose connection now. And that's the fear. The fear that we all experience when we have something in our past is the loss of connection. It's the loss of relationship. It's the sense of I couldn't go on without them, or I couldn't exist in a world where I wasn't seen as such. And so I'm not going to share what it was because there's no way that I'm putting that on the table to be messed with. The loss of relationship, the loss of connection, the loss of belonging, the loss of your place in the world. There's no way I'm telling you, oh, it's just that was then and it doesn't matter anymore, or there's no way I'm going to tell them that. I'm just going to keep that over here. And so if this is you in one way, shape, or form, and there's other ways that this kind of moves into our lives, then you're playing what I would call the shame game. It's a game that most of us play, and we hide away certain parts of ourselves for the fear of what might happen to us if someone or the wrong people or the right people were to find out. Just a simple little thing we all do, and hoping no one ever finds out. Look who we are today. Look who I am today, you might say. If they find out, they would not like me. They wouldn't want to spend time with me. Or look at how they think of me right now. There's no way I'm going to lose that. And shame is powerful that way. It's powerful that way. Over the next few weeks, we're going to look at shame closely and see if we can't start to break free from its power. We're first going to today look at how it relates to our relationship with God. And of course, this is a fundamental piece of the broken reality of humans, and shame shows up in the very first story of the Bible. The very first story of the Bible, we see shame. We see it right there in the first creation story, in the first 2 chapters of the book that we believe is breathed by God, and showing us not only who God is, but who we are, and not only showing us what has happened in the past through the human experience, but also what happens now. And of course, shame is not something that went away. It's still here. And if you pay attention, or you travel, or you used to watch Oprah, shame shows up on Oprah. It shows up, I don't even know if there's an Oprah anymore. Does she have like a different thing? I don't know. Best-selling books all over YouTube, TED Talks, podcasts, TikToks. Shame in a lot of contexts can be like a buzzword, where people are trying to figure it out and understand it. And some great research has been done on shame. It's a powerful word. And when you stop and think about it, we have many different intensity levels we use it. From joking, to shame someone, however you define the word, to that actual gut level disgust we feel when someone has truly done something awful. We actually use the word interchangeably, like, how could they do that? They should be ashamed, as shameful, or that person has no shame, or whatever, or, shame on you, something silly, a little joke, or just something that is not really that meaningful. But we kind of use the word all different ways. It pops up on Reels and TikToks, and about being vulnerable, and about shame in others, and being completely shameless, and how, basically, if you have a certain level of shame, the kids call it cringe. No, that's like that's the word. It's sus if you have shame. So what is shame? What is it really, right? It shows up on in the first story of the Bible, and what is it at its core? And how do we need to understand it differently? When we see in Genesis chapter 1 and 2, we see the creation narrative. And as we read through it, we see that God has formed all the wild animals and the birds, and he brought them to man, and then man names them. and gives them all these names, every living creature. And then the man gives names to the livestock and the birds and all that. And then Adam, through that process, realizes that he had no counterpart, no partner, no suitable helper. So God calls him to fall asleep, and he takes one of his ribs, and then the Lord God made woman from the man, and he brought her to the man, he said, this is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh, the man says, and she'll be called woman. She was taken out of man, and now you have man and woman together in the garden, in the presence of God, in Eden. And he says, this is why a man will leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife, and they'll become one flesh. And so you get this picture of really fascinating narrative of one person being, just themselves, and then them seeing no one like them that they can partner with. And then essentially God takes that person and kind of splits them in half and makes two people. And then God says that they're supposed to come back together. So there's one flesh, and then the one flesh becomes two flesh. And then in the name of God, now the two flesh are supposed to come back together to be one flesh, to work together. And that's a really gorgeous picture of what God is up to in marriage and relationship. And they become one flesh. And then it says this in Genesis 2:25, it says, Adam and his wife were both naked, and they felt no shame. They were both naked, and they felt no shame. Very interesting that there would be that type of description. Almost as if to say, why would you, all we have is creation, all we have is this perfect, sublime environment, and why do we need to be told that there's a possibility of anything? But it highlights that there's something about the nature of Adam and Eve from the beginning in a world that hasn't fallen, where shame is not a part of it. There's no shame, and they don't feel it. And the next part of the story has them eating, if you go in Genesis chapter 3, from this tree and this fruit that they were told not to in the scriptures. God says, you can eat from any of the trees, but don't eat from this. For if you do it, then you'll die. And we've talked a lot about what that means, the choice to say, I believe my definition of good and bad is the right one and God's is wrong, so I'm gonna do things my way. I'm gonna gain my wisdom and pick my wisdom and way over God's. And that's part of what the tree symbolized. But as soon as they pick that and their version of good and bad becomes their pursuit, it says, then the eyes of both of them were opened. Both of their eyes were opened, and they realized that they were naked. And so they kind of cover themselves with fig leaves, and they make this covering. And then they hear God walking through the desert, or walking through the garden in the cool of the day. And it says that they hid from the Lord God among the trees of the garden. A question for us: did they really see, literally just see for the first time? When it says that their eyes were opened, does it mean that before that they couldn't see? No, it means that now that they had done this particular behavior and had chosen this particular approach to their future and how they were going to live and how they were going to govern their lives, the way that they were going to live, the path that they were going to walk on, it was in that moment that they saw something different. Something about them changed, or they realized something that they didn't see before. Now they see it. God told them that they would die from eating, and now for the first time, they saw their nakedness as vulnerability and the beginning of death. Something like that. Who knows exactly what they thought, but they were different in their own eyes. You with me? They were different in their own eyes, and they felt different than they had in the chapter that came before this. There was something about who they were that was so different to them as they perceived it, and their eyes are open and they noticed something. It was so different, it was so new, and it was so alarming in a sense that they had to do two different things immediately. Immediately, they felt they had to cover themselves up. So they didn't think there was anything wrong with their status before they ate this fruit and chose this opposite way. But then as soon as they did, they felt, we got to cover this up. Like no one can see this. And then it's not just that they covered themselves up, right? So that no one could see them. It's that God is coming to be with them and they feel they have to hide themselves from God. So they cover themselves up because they don't like what they see. They don't think anyone else would like what they see. And then when God comes, they're thinking, God can't even see us. We don't want him to see us. We need to hide ourselves from God. Why would someone cover themselves up and hide themselves from God? Why would someone cover themselves up and hide themselves from God? Why would you cover yourself up and hide yourself from God? Why would you cover yourself up and hide yourself from your spouse? Why would you hide yourself from your friends? Why would you hide yourself from your parents? The answer is shame. Shame. What were they feeling? They were feeling something about who they were had become unacceptable. Unacceptable. So they hid it with leaves, and not just something about them. They thought they were now unacceptable, and they hid themselves. So here's what we know about shame. First of all, shame is a feeling. A feeling. And of course, with a feeling, it's not just a feeling, it's what a feeling is, right? A feeling has thoughts associated with it. It has a sensory aspect to it. It's not just kind of what you think because of what you're feeling in your body. It's something you feel in you, and so it makes you think a certain way. It's something you think about that makes you feel a certain way. But it's wrapped up in this altogether kind of feeling, right? It says in Genesis chapter 2 that they were both naked and they felt no shame. Well, now they feel shame. They're starting to feel something in them that is literally making their heads spin. It's making them lose control. It's making them do things that they never thought they would do. It's making them feel things and run from opportunities and beauty and all the things that were put in front. It's making them kind of move in a new way. It's a deep-rooted belief. And it's not just that they did something wrong. It's not just that they did something they shouldn't have done. That's guilt. But that they are wrong. That in their core, Adam and Eve, at the deepest part of who they are, believed that it was fractured, unfixable, unlovable, and ugly. Shame is the intensely painful feeling or experience of believing that we are flawed and therefore unworthy of love and belonging. That's Brené Brown's definition of shame. Shame is the intensely painful feeling or experience of believing that we are flawed and therefore unworthy of love and belonging. Yet the scriptures show us in the narrative that even after disobeying God, it can't be true about us. It can't be true. The first part is true. The feeling that you're flawed. But then the feeling that now you're unlovable. Now you're unacceptable. Now there's no love for you. You could never be loved. You're flawed, but you're fatally flawed. You're unfixable. Or that it might mean that if they saw that unfixable thing would kind of conclude a relational disconnection, that you can't bear. And ironically, any fear of relational disconnection because you're fatally flawed makes us disconnect anyway. And so many people who are living in shame never actually get the intimacy that they want because they hide. And that's what Adam and Eve do. They want a relationship with God. Now they feel something different. They see something different. So they hide themselves because they don't want to lose connection. And in hiding themselves, they lose connection. So the scriptures show us that this can't be true. It can't be true that they're unlovable and unfixable. Why? It's just so simple. Why? It says because God came looking for them. God came looking for them. He's looking to see them. He's looking to be with them. He's looking to engage with them, and they think God doesn't want to be with them. There it is. There's the fundamental lie of the human experience. Us believing that because we did that thing, that God doesn't want to be with us. And on the first 3 pages, that's not true. God shows up. He's looking for them. He wants an encounter with them. He wants to be with them. Could it be that God wants to be with us? And the things that we've done wrong as well, like that he knows and he knows that that's part of it. And he wants to be with you in those dark, shameful moments? The answer is yes, he does. Why then is what we feel about ourselves when we do wrong the opposite of how God responds to us? Why? Well, the answer is in the word shame. It's actually kind of what shame does. Shame is that new variable in the equation that throws off perception and reality. See, back in Genesis 2:25, when you look closer at the Hebrew word for shame, it gives tremendous insight into the question we're asking. Why is it we feel so differently than the way God is acting? They've done this wrong thing. God shows up. Where are you? Shame is a feeling that we are unlovable. Brene Brown says shame is simply the feeling that something is wrong with us. It's not, I did something wrong. It's I am wrong, fully wrong, unlovable, unforgivable, unfixable, ugly to God. And so this is a very important distinction. Very important, fundamental for the entire series. Guilt, which is a feeling that says I did something wrong, is a true belief or feeling when you did something wrong. Shame, that goes beyond the behavior and says, at your core, you're unlovable, you're unfixable, God doesn't want to be around you because you did that anymore. That's false. That's a lie. And here's what makes that feeling so strong. The word shame, at its root, it means to be confounded or to confuse or to be confused. So if you take that first part of Genesis chapter 2, it says that they were both naked and they were not confused. They were not confused. Well, what weren't they confused about? What's the main thing they weren't confused about? What's the entire narrative before that? Here's Adam. He's ruling. He's naming. He's the image of God. He sees no partner for himself. He gets a partner. He says, wow, these two should come together. Let no one take them apart. They're gonna be fruitful. They're gonna be the image of God. Everything about who they are, their full identity is crystal clear. Who they are, what they're supposed to be, the relationship that they're supposed to be in, and it's crystal clear. And it says, there they are. They were both naked, and they had zero confusion. They weren't confused about who they were. There's nothing that could make them think, I'm not created in the image of God. I'm not supposed to be with this person. We are here together in this garden representing God, bringing the goodness of God into the world on his behalf. We're the image of God. We are his children. We are his love. And there they were in that space with those tasks, and they had zero confusion. Shame is any lie we have believed that God doesn't love us and forgive us, and that he wants us. Shame is any lie that we have believed in our core. And it's not, when I articulate the lie, you may say, I don't believe that, because you might not think it. But when you believe something, it's a commentary on your actions. So shame is when you, in your core, believe that you can't take who you are or what you have done and both to God, because you are so afraid of putting that in the light of his eyes. And you think that it won't be forgiven. And it's not just some general idea. I'm a sinner. I'm a sinner. I go to God all the time and say, I'm a sinner. Please forgive me. No. It's a specific sinful pattern, belief, history that you do not articulate in the presence of God, because you can't imagine articulating it in the presence of God. Because to say it out loud makes you start to believe the lie that it's just so. So what you do is, in this amazing reality that is in the space of who you are, you have this cognitive dissonance. It's too hard for me to name that specific thing, so I just don't it doesn't exist. I don't talk about it, and I never go to God on that specific topic. But you walk around with a monkey on your back, knowing that there's sinful, broken things that you need God to deal with, but instead of taking them to God, you hide them in your soul. You mask them. You carry them, but you never take them to God, because God wouldn't do this. And then sometimes shame is the opposite, right? So if it just means confused, you're confused. It's specifically being confused about your identity, that you're created in the image of God. So if you're confused about your identity, some people believe that they're greater than God. And some people believe that they don't have any problems. And so that's the other side of shame. I'm so fine. I'm just a good person. I do good things. I tuck in my shirt. I'm a shirt tucker person. I wear nice clothes. I have a good job. Our kids go to whatever it is. It's good. I don't know. We have the good life. We make good decisions. We're good people. We spend time with good people. We don't spend time with bad people. I don't know. Whatever it is that you think that you don't have, that then tricks you into thinking that you don't need to go in to God. That you think, well, that person has a mound of sin. I don't want to be around them, and God wouldn't want them around if they tried. And you think, I don't need to go into God because I don't have any problems. That's confusion. That's confusion. See, what people want to believe is that shame is reserved for the people who have survived terrible traumas, but it's not true. Shame is something we all experience. To feel shame is to actually be human. There are studies that identify shame as the dominant emotion experienced by mental health clients. The dominant emotion, exceeding anger, fear, grief, and anxiety. The dominant emotion that most people feel in their life is, I'm not worthy. God won't love me. God won't forgive me. God doesn't see me. Not, I did something wrong. I am wrong at my core, fractured, unlovable, unforgivable. What does sin do to us? sin makes us question who we are. Sin makes us question who we are, because sin, especially in the Genesis context, is not just doing bad things. It's not doing good things. It's not doing the thing you're designed for. So the way that this works is, as soon as I don't do what I'm designed for, a lie creeps in to say, you are not even who God says you are. It makes us question who we are. Am I their son? Am I really God's son? Am I really his daughter? Because I think if he would see this, he would say, no, you're out of here. You're out. You're excommunicated. You don't belong. I don't have anything for you. I have stuff stored up for people that have less than that. You crossed the line. You went too far. Your mountain of sin is too high. You can't come into the presence of God. And here's what's so fascinating. The use of this idea of no shame and knowing who they are and their identity. It's not just in some general context, it's in the context of heaven. In this wonderful place that God made. And when he made it, it was for them to dwell with God together. And they're supposed to dwell together. And when he makes the creation, what does he say at the end of the creation? That it's good, right? And then when he makes Adam and Eve, he says it's very good. And that's a commentary on identity. God made it, and God says it's good, and God says that we're very good and that we're made in his image. And here's the confusion. Your sin makes you believe that you are no longer who God says you are at your core. Your deepest, clearest belief is now in question. God called you very good. Your sin, you sin and you think it's gone. Who am I? Confusion, shame. I want you to look at the narrative. God doesn't come looking for them and ask who you are. God never asks, who are you? Who are you? What? I don't recognize you. He doesn't come and ask them who they are. He comes to them because he knows who they are. And he wants to be with them. He doesn't ask who they are. He asks where they are. Where are you? God never asks who you are. You see, sometimes we have this belief in church that because of sin, the very core of who we are is gone. And it's confusing. So I'm God's child, but my sin is so bad that I am now not God's child. And then sadly, the church actually uses shame. The studies say that faith communities and schools are not exempt from shame. So then the church will actually misrepresent God. And when someone is a sinner and they are messed up, we will actually make them feel like who they are is wrong because of the thing that they did or that they've done. Listen, any thought or teaching that you ceased to be the image of God as you were originally created is a lie that leads to shame and hiding. Sin is real. And we'll talk more about it next week, and it gets into you. And you could make arguments that sin over time fundamentally changes you. It kills you. It makes you die. Like it just rips you apart from the inside out, but it doesn't ever erase who you are at your core. Sin doesn't cause us to cease to be the image of God. Sin does lead to death if not dealt with over time and total decay. But this idea that, and I'm not trying to pick on anybody I don't have I'm not on one about this, but this notion I'm just a sinner saved by grace is wrong. No one is just a sinner saved by grace. Implication being that I started out a sinner. God made me a sinner, and that's it. I'm saved by grace. No, actually, that's a nice little quib. Just a sinner saved by grace. Easy to say, yet not true. Sometimes what's true is more difficult to say. Maybe the quib could be this. I am created in the image of God and therefore a child of God. Sin has become my master, but God defeated sin and death, so it can no longer be my master. I am freed from sin by grace, and Jesus is my master. But that's just not as slick as I'm just a sinner saved by grace. How about this way? I started out at home, safe and sound, and then I got lost. But now I'm found. You see, what the scriptures go on to tell us what happens in Christ is actually what has been taken away because of sin. I'm seated in the heavenly places. I'm forgiven. I'm righteous. I'm a child of God. I'm in right standing with God. I'm righteous. I'm blessed. I have every spiritual blessing in the heavenly places. All that happens in Christ is what God did to get us back to how we were created, and it just erases the sin. So what Paul is going through in Romans, when he talks about what we believe can separate us from God, is the lie of shame. And that's why he says, no, did you understand? Like, if shame meant that what you were thinking and feeling was true, then who Jesus is and what he did for you wouldn't have happened. Because he loves you. That thing that you think separates you from God forever, Jesus moved into your space to give you an opportunity to not let it separate you from God. So he loves you so much that the thing that you think he doesn't love you for is the reason he came in to show you extravagant love. You're missing this. So then Romans chapter 8, right? You put that in the context of the broader reality of shame, the lie, who I am at my core. I never was good. Now I'm just worse. I was the image of God. Sin raptured me. Death is in me. I have the wrong master. I need to be set free from my master that is sin so I can worship the God who made me. And so Romans chapter 8, can anything ever separate us from Christ's love? Does it mean he no longer loves us if we have trouble or calamity? Does it mean he no longer loves us if we have trouble or calamity, or are persecuted or hungry or destitute or in danger or threatened with death, as the scriptures say? No. Despite all these things, overwhelming victory is ours through Christ who loved us. Ephesians chapter 3, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith. And I pray that you, being rooted and established in love, may have power together with all the Lord's holy people to grasp. What? How wide, how long, how deep the love of Christ is, and to know the love that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled to the measure of the fullness of God. My friends, we are images of God who choose to do things that we should not do, and God moves towards us despite that. That's what he's about. So you can take all of it. Like, you can take it to him. That's the only place. Like, that's where you get the healing. We're made in his image, and some of the early church fathers grappled with this idea that we never cease to be the image of God, but we may not act in his likeness. The image of God never goes away, but we are not acting like him. We bear God's image, but something is not quite right. Basil of Caesarea, one of the early church fathers, said that we're like rusted mirrors. We're an image. God sits in front of the mirror. We're the reflection of God. And there's a rust, there's a dirt on it, but that image is there. Shame is what tells us that there's something wrong with us, and it means that everything is wrong with us. Let me just give you a couple thoughts on shame. Shame didn't exist pre-fall. We already looked at that. And God doesn't confuse Adam and Eve when they sin. He's not confusing. And here's what's really interesting about shame is sometimes we can think that shame is like a good mechanism for growth. Do you know that shame in therapy and in relationships never fixes anything and never heals anything? Why? Because if I really believe that you are unacceptable and I can't forgive you, even though you have this mountain of stuff, you're never gonna come to me. You're never gonna show it to me. Why would I bring my stuff to a God who just says, see, you're worthless? That's why shame is so powerful. That's why Satan wants you to believe that what you've done is so bad, you can't go in to the one person, the Father, who can and will and wants to heal you. So you won't go. And you'll think, man, I got to get this figured out before I go talk to him again. Man, I got to get my stuff together. Then I can go to him. And he says it's the opposite. You come to me and you find what you need in your brokenness. If you were told that you are fundamentally unlovable, why would you ever expose your sin? Why would you ever tell God about it? You see, the narrative and the language that's used in the life of Jesus is much more interesting. It's much more real. You see, there's a narrative about a sheep that's lost. It's the sheep. It's his sheep. It doesn't stop being a sheep. What's wrong with the sheep? It's lost. So what does the shepherd do? The shepherd goes and finds the lost sheep. The sheep doesn't cease to be a sheep. The sheep doesn't cease to be his sheep. It's just one that's lost. And it thinks, I'm lost. Sin makes us lost. There's a narrative about a coin, a beautiful coin. It doesn't stop being a coin when the coin is lost. It's just a lost coin. And that coin thinks, I'm lost, I'm done, no way, I can't go in, God can't forgive me, nothing. And then here comes this woman sweeping through the house, moving over the furniture, to find the coin. And the intrinsic value of the coin never went away. The coin went away. And God finds it and cleans it. There's a narrative of the dirty cup. The cup can be clean or the cup can be diseased. The cup can be full of sin. We can think, oh, I'm a cup, but I'm full of sin. And we think, I can't go to God with my cup full. And he says, bring your full cup of sin to me. That's how you heal it and become clean. Don't believe the lie that you have to hide yourself from God. There's the washing away of sin. There's the narrative of not cutting down the tree because it bears bad fruit. Jesus said, don't cut down the tree. Redo the soil. Replant the seeds and watch the tree grow good fruit. You think you need to be cut down. You think you're used goods. You see, the thing about shame is it's not just something that you do that can make you believe the lie that you can't ever go into the presence of God and receive mercy. It's also what people say about you that you believe that's not true that makes you not go in to the presence of God. And so you can believe, I'm damaged good. My dad did this to me every day. My mom, my friends, they said that. I'm believing I can't. There's no way. I'm just just rip me up, man, throw me out. I can't go to God and tell him about this stuff. And he says, I'm here so you can come to me and tell me about that stuff. And when you put that stuff in my hands, that's where I heal it. That's where you want it to go away. There's the story of Jesus when he's asked about taxes, that he makes a commentary on the image of God. And he says, oh, whose image is on the coin? It's Caesar's. Give to Caesar his image. I want all mine. That's Jews, Gentiles, those far off, those that have been brought near. That's everyone who's lost. You're the image of God. And if he thought you were unlovable, he wouldn't make himself a baby. He wouldn't degrade himself. He wouldn't put off his likeness of God in the sense of being human and come into this space and say, I'm here. I'm looking you in the eyeball to tell you who you are. Worth dying for, worth searching for, worth cleaning, worth singing over, worth celebrating. Bernard Clairvaux, an early church father, he talks about this reality this way. Every soul, even though weighed down with sins, ensnared in vice, caught in the allurements of the passions, held captive in exile and imprisoned in the body. Even I say, though it be thus damned in despair, can find within itself not only reasons for yearning for the hope of pardon and the hope of mercy, but also for making bold to aspire to the nuptials of the word, not hesitating to establish a covenant of union with God, and not being ashamed to carry the sweet yoke of love along with the King of the angels. What will the soul not dare with him whose marvelous image it sees within itself and whose striking likeness it recognizes within itself? When God sees you, he sees a piece of himself, and all the other stuff, he lives, he dies, and he resurrects to dismantle. God never, throughout the scriptures, finds a woman or a man with the lower list of sins to employ into his grand narrative. He never finds the ones who do it a little bit better, who have a little less to worry about. He never measures us that way. There's a measurement that God uses when he's looking at his people to see who could actually be the kind of pliable images that may represent him in the world. And the singular quality that he finds in those is a quality of a desire for mercy. The difference between me and anyone else is not the mountain of sin, it's the necessity for mercy. If I go into God and beg for mercy, God says, okay, that's the separator. Not that you did less. You did just as much. You just drew near. Now I can work with you. Now I can help you. Now I can set you free. One of the things we know about shame through studies is that shame loses its power when it's spoken. When it's spoken. When you say who you are, when you know who you are, just saying it, just saying, I'm a child of God. I'm saved by God. God loves me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. I once was blind, but now I see. I've had the dirt and the shame, but man, God, he said, I know who you are. I have no confusion about you. You're confused about you. I have no confusion about you. Confess to me and let us confess in unity who you are, a child of God, a son of God, a daughter of God. Will you receive the gift of everlasting love? Or will you let a lie keep you from your source of healing? Let's stand up together and we're going to sing a song where we declare the truth. And this is true. This is true for everyone in the room. I know some of you are thinking, not me, man. If you knew, if you saw back then, I'm telling you, God would have a different disposition towards me than the rest of you. It's not true. It's not true. He sees you. He's asking not who you are, but where are you? Do you want to tell him that you're starting to recognize the truth about who you are regardless of what you've done? Let's take a moment and just sing these words of truth against this powerful lie in our lives.